Hafaday, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Nita Bisita. We do hope that you enjoy watching our weekly episodes as much as we enjoy putting them together for you. I think you'll particularly like tonight's episode.
When Ferdinand Magellan and his ships hurriedly departed from Guam after a skirmish with the ancient Chamorros in 1521, it was by mutual consent. He wanted to leave, and we were glad to see him go. But he fired the last shots. Musket fire at our people, and the name Ladrone at our island. It would be 44 years before the Spaniards returned to claim possession of Guam, and it would be another 100 years before Father San Vittorius arrived to start a mission. After leaving Guam with a full stomach, Magellan continued westward to the Philippines. As he was prone to do, he once again found himself in battle, but this time he lost to a superior Filipino force. He had lived his life by the sword, and he died by the sword. His actions, which led to the conflict, were in violation of the terms of his contract with the King of Spain, and he was considered a man without honor, and in death he fell from grace with his king. In the Philippines, the Spaniards literally and figuratively found themselves a gold mine. For many, many years before Magellan set foot on those islands, the Filipinos had already been engaged in commerce with neighboring island countries, Japan, China, and others on the Asian mainland. The Spaniards immediately exploited the enormous potential for trade of goods between Europe and Asia. Under their direction and control, an eastward route across the Pacific was sought, and large ships of their design, capable of carrying over 300 passengers and tons of cargo, were built in the Philippines by local and Asian shipbuilders. Thus was born in 1565 the most enterprising commercial venture of the time, the exchange of goods and commodities between Europe and Asia via the Manila Galleons, with Acapulco, Mexico as a receiving and distribution point for passengers and cargo headed for Spain. For 250 years, the galleons sailed directly between Manila and Mexico, an average of once a year, completing the round trip with a stopover on Guam on the return leg from Acapulco. Their precious loads made them targets for pirates. Overloading them with passengers and cargo made them prone to founder at sea, and the long trip across the Pacific took its toll heavily on human lives. For Guam, it was usually the highlight of the year to be visited by a returning galleon, which was celebrated with much fanfare and joyful activities. The galleon was Guam's sole contact with the world beyond its reed. It was also the galleon which brought goods and visitors from Europe and Asia. The visits by the Manila Galleons had a marked influence on the local population culturally, religiously, and linguistically. Over many decades, they transported in and out of Guam hundreds of Mexicans, Spaniards, and Filipinos, many of whom made Guam their home and were assimilated into the local community. The Chamorros of today are descendants of the blending of these bloodlines. This remarkable chapter in world history, in which Guam played a notable role, was made possible through the genius of Ferdinand Magellan. Yet for all his contributions, there are few memorials in his honor. He is in the Hall of Explorers in his native Portugal. There's a statue in his honor in Chile, and in the Philippines he shares a memorial with Legazpi. Interestingly enough, the island that he disparagingly named Ladrone, and whose people he slaughtered during his visit in 1521, has the only other memorial for him in Yamato. In 1815, as the Spanish Empire declined, the last galleon sailed from Acapulco to Manila, ending the 250-year saga of the Manila Galleons. Through the remotest of chances, the name of the galleon on the final voyage was El Magallanes, the Magellan. And like its namesake, it stopped on Guam for replenishment before sailing on to the Philippines and the pages of history.
It has been our pleasure bringing you tonight's episode. We'll see you next week. Guajo si Ben Blas. Buenas noches.